Right now, 800 million people around the world consume potatoes every single day. Some prefer them fried, some boiled, some as mashed potatoes. Potatoes are among the most widely consumed foods in the world, both affordable and filling, the third most important food source for humanity after wheat and rice. So universally loved that when it arrives at the table, you don't think twice. When you look at a kilogram of potatoes at the market, what comes to mind? Probably nothing. But this underground growing tuber was at the very center of two of the most dramatic turning points in European history. Surprising, isn't it? Before you hear the story and are surprised even more, like the video and subscribe to the channel. First, it saved a continent from hunger, caused a population explosion in Europe, and became the staple food of empires. Then, the vulnerability created by that same plant opened the door to one of the most devastating humanitarian crises in history. Millions of people lost their lives. Millions more were forced to leave their homes and could never return. But the story goes back much further than those events. The potato comes from the high Andes Mountains of South America. At 3,000 to 4,000 meters above sea level, in that harsh geography where freezing nights and severe climates prevail. The Inca civilization had been growing potatoes and consuming them for thousands of years. Where wheat could not reach, ancient peoples turned to growing potatoes. Where corn froze, potatoes could survive underground. This tuber that could grow even in the harsh climate of the Andes at high altitude was the backbone of the Incas' survival strategy. The Incas dried potatoes to produce a special food product they called chuño, which could be stored for years, even decades, without spoiling. This storage technique provided them with extraordinary protection against famines. In 1532, Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro conquered Peru, and he loaded his ship not only with gold, silver, and cacao, but also with potatoes. Potatoes reached Spain in the 1570s. But Europeans approached this new plant with extreme suspicion. It grew underground. No one knew what it was. It had flowers that bloomed at midnight. This was even more suspicious. Some clergymen declared potatoes untrustworthy because they were not mentioned in the Bible. Some doctors pointed to potatoes as the cause of various diseases, including leprosy and scurvy. In France, potatoes were used only as animal feed for many years. In Switzerland, some cantons officially banned potatoes. In England, the fact that potatoes grew underground made them suspicious. Nothing that the sun could not see could be good. This prejudice kept Europe deprived of one of the world's most nutritious and productive plants for approximately 2 centuries.
So how did Europe finally adopt and consume potatoes? The answer to this question lies in one of history's most interesting and creative marketing stories. In the mid-18th century, France faced a serious famine crisis. Despite the rapidly growing population, agricultural productivity could not keep up with this increase. Harvest seasons were inconsistent, the soil was tired and unproductive. Bread prices climbed a little higher every passing year. People were forming long queues in the streets just to buy bread. The anger of these people was slowly lighting the fuse of the French Revolution that would soon erupt. France needed a new and reliable food source, but no one wanted to eat potatoes. And it was precisely at this point that a young pharmacist named Antoine-Augustin Parmentier would leave his mark on history. Parmentier had been taken prisoner by Prussia during the 7 Years' War. The only food that kept him alive during the long months he spent in the prison camp was potatoes. He survived for days, weeks, eating only potatoes, and he was healthy. In fact, French military doctors had not considered potatoes a serious food source until his captivity. Parmentier witnessed firsthand through his own experience just how wrong this prejudice was. When he returned to France, there was only one thing on his mind: convincing the people of his country to eat potatoes. But this was an extremely difficult task. French peasants had no trust in potatoes whatsoever. The church was opposed, doctors were suspicious, and no rational argument was enough to break this deep-rooted prejudice. Parmentier then tried a completely different strategy: reverse psychology. He convinced King Louis XVI to plant a large potato field on the Sablon plain near Paris, and he had this field guarded by armed soldiers on watch. During the day, the guards kept strict watch over the field, but at night, Parmentier deliberately removed the guards. The message was extremely clear: if there are soldiers around this field, whatever is inside must certainly be valuable. Curious and greedy peasants would sneak into the field at night and steal potatoes. They would plant the stolen potatoes in their own fields, and slowly potatoes began to spread to the rural areas of France. This was history's first viral marketing campaign. Parmentier went one step further. He decorated King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette with potato flowers. The king pinned it to his lapel, the queen pinned it in her hair. In the magnificent halls of the Palace of Versailles, the potato flower became a fashionable accessory. Whatever the palace adopted, the people adopted too. And France, leaving behind centuries of prejudice in an instant, welcomed potatoes to its tables. A pharmacist's intelligence had broken down 2 centuries of prejudice. If French fries are also one of your favorite foods, like the video and subscribe to the channel.
After accepting that France was reliable, this humble tuber began to spread rapidly to the rest of Europe. Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, Scandinavian countries, the same picture emerged everywhere. Potatoes grew in little land and gave abundant crops, were very easy to cultivate, cheap and extremely nutritious. For poor peasants, having these 4 qualities together was nothing short of a miracle. And as potatoes spread across Europe, Europe began to experience a population explosion. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the European population, which was approximately 140 million in 1750, had reached the incredible figure of 265 million by 1850. In other words, the population had nearly doubled in just 100 years. Most historians largely agree that one of the most important reasons for this explosion was the potato. A hectare of potato field could feed far more people than a wheat field of the same size, and potatoes could grow in almost any climate, in any soil condition. Hunger diminished. People began to live longer. Infant deaths caused by hunger decreased considerably as well. But no country came to value potatoes as much as Ireland, and this attachment gradually turned into a trap. Ireland in the 18th century was a country struggling to survive under extremely harsh conditions and hardships. The great majority of the population consisted of poor peasants. Most of the fertile land belonged to British landowners, and Irish peasants worked on this land as tenants. They were forced to sell most of the crops they grew in order to pay their rent debts. Very little was left for themselves. The only thing keeping Irish peasants standing in this difficult equation was, hard as it may be to believe, the potato. Because potatoes were cheap, abundant, and extremely nutritious. Potatoes grown on a small plot of land could feed a family for an entire year. For poor Irish peasants, potatoes were not merely a food, they were the sole guarantee of survival. In the early 19th century, the majority of Ireland's poor consumed almost nothing but potatoes. 5 to 6 kilograms of potatoes a day, almost nothing else. Milk, bread, meat, these were inaccessible luxuries for many families. This dependence put Ireland in an incredibly vulnerable position. They had tied all their hopes for survival to a single crop, and that being dependent on a single crop was always a harbinger of great risk. And that risk became reality in 1845. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. In the next part, we move to the darkest page of this story.
In the summer of 1845, strange things began to happen in Ireland's potato fields. Potato leaves were suddenly turning black. Tubers were silently rotting underground. And this rot was so fast that a field that looked healthy in the morning could be completely destroyed by evening. This unknown disease was spreading with the wind, from one field to another, from one village to another, from one county to another. No one knew why. No one could stop it. The culprit was a fungus called Phytophthora infestans. It had most likely reached Ireland on trading ships coming from North America, and when it encountered Ireland's wet, cool climate, it multiplied at an incredible speed. The fungus's spores flew with the wind, reaching every field, every tuber. About a third of the 1845 harvest was destroyed. The Irish were worried, but not yet desperate. Perhaps next year would be better. It wasn't. In 1846, the situation was much worse. About 3/4 of that year's harvest was completely wiped out. There was no going back now. People were hungry, truly, painfully hungry, and there was nothing to eat. The British administration sent an extremely insufficient amount of aid, and this aid often could not reach those in need. In some areas, people were eating grass. Some were dying by roadsides, in fields, on the doorsteps of their homes. 1847 went down in history as the Black Year. The famine lasted until 1852. During these 7 years, at least 1 million of Ireland's population of approximately 8 million lost their lives to hunger and related diseases. More than 1 million others left the country. Most went to the United States. Some lost their lives during the journey. The great majority of those who left never returned. The traces of this wave of migration are still vividly visible today. More than 70 million people in the world identify themselves as being of Irish origin. This figure is approximately 14 times the current population of Ireland. And the roots of this diaspora go back to those dark years that began in a potato field. A tuber had saved a continent. The same tuber had destroyed a nation. What strange stories history holds, doesn't it? Every food on our table has a story like this. Write your suggestion for the next video's food in the comments. See you in the next video.